Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Create Incubator 2023. I'm Shehan,
And I'm Shenelle, and we're very happy to be here. And today's topic is
becoming international content creators. And we are very excited to be here for the second time and share a bit of our insights with you guys on creating your content and reaching an international audience.
so I'm going to start with our story. You
Yep.
can maybe change the slide.
Oops.
Yes. So initially, when we began, there was the idea of creating content, but we never really had the idea of who the content we were going to create was, who the audience was. And I think when people create content, especially in Sri Lanka, you immediately start to think about the people you interact with, the people you talk to, and that is the local audience. And it can be very rewarding to make content for the local audience because your chances of growing are very high. You can grow really fast, you can get a lot of engagement, and brands love engagement, which means you can fast track to getting paid brand partnerships, and things can happen very fast. So it's very tempting, and it seems like the very obvious route when you become a creator to make content for the local audience. Now, that's fine. But I think what we want to encourage you today is to look at the possibilities and opportunities that can arise when you create content for an international audience.
Yeah.
So, starting with our story, when we began, we knew we wanted to travel the world. And the first thing that when we started making our content was that we made it thinking that we want to travel the world and create content. And for that, we needed to focus on an international audience. So from the beginning, we kind of aimed our content at international audiences, and this can be a little tough.
Tricky, yeah. And one thing we were lucky in that sense is that we knew our main mission of creating content was to be able to do this all around the world. So immediately we knew, okay, the content had to be for an international audience. However, we didn't realize the journey we'd have to take and how different it would be had we done this locally.
And to give some backstory, we wanted to be travel content creators. Specifically, we wanted to travel the world. So that meant we had to find a way of making our content relatable to people who wanted to not only visit Sri Lanka, but who wanted to go to Thailand, who wanted to go to the Philippines. And this is usually a Western audience that creates a large portion of travelers, I would say. So we had to think about how can we make our content relatable to this audience as well. So essentially stepping out of your comfort zone to create content for a more global audience.
Yeah. So before we get into it, just want to remind everyone that we are doing a Q&A towards the end of this session. So if you do have any questions along the way, make sure you send it over. I believe on the Zoom there is a chat that you can send your questions. If not, you can email it to them, and we will be addressing that towards the end of the session. So let's start off with why tailor your content to an international audience. First of all, if you just take the stats, there's 4.8 billion social media users around the world, whereas in Sri Lanka, it's only 8.4 million.
Yeah.
And out of that 8.4 million, if you really look at sort of engagement, it's a much smaller number.
Audience, yeah.
So,
and then if you look at English-speaking content, like people who consume English content within Sri Lanka, that's an even smaller percentage.
Correct. And over here, the main thing that we understood was in terms of the content we're creating and in terms of what we wanted to do, we knew that we have a much bigger market to sort of speak to.
Yeah.
And even though that is a bit tough to penetrate at the start, the benefits, the pros of it outweigh the cons later on down the line. And we're going to basically take you through that journey, make you try and explain to you
why,
the hows, the difficulties that you're going to face, and then from there, what you can do to get started immediately. So,
I mean, if I just want to expand on what you just said, I would say that, like I said earlier in the beginning, you can grow really fast and very quickly and have a very almost established career locally by creating content for the local audience. But there is a cap. At some point, you may grow fast and you may have a lot of engagement, but your growth is going to be capped at a certain point because of this number. But when you make your content with a international audience in mind, now your scope is entirely different. You have, I mean, the sky is really the limit in what you can create. And even if you want to focus on something very niche, and that niche is really small in Sri Lanka, you still have the ability to make strides.
And
you
find that audience.
Yeah, if you can find that audience in an international.
Beyond reach, there is also the point of impact, right? So later on in our journey after about 2 or 3 years, when we started doing more work around Sri Lanka, we realized, hey, there is the opportunity to create impact through the content you create. And I think that should be a part of everyone's mission at some point, how do you create a positive impact as well?
Through your
and
content.
When you take it in that sense as well, the impact you could create is far greater when you are speaking to an international audience, because there are a number of things here. One being you're looking at people who are outside of the country, who are in a different economic situation, in a different cultural situation, and are able to perceive things and add input and add value into your source of your body of work. And then the other is that you never know what you might inspire other creators to come and work on based off your body of work. So the impact that you can create through an international audience is also massive.
Yeah.
Of course, depending on the sort of content you're creating, you'd obviously be able to sort of analyze and decide, okay, would this content benefit more our local audience here in Sri Lanka, or would this content benefit the local audience by speaking to an international audience and getting them to support?
I mean, a perfect example would be when last year, when things were a bit chaotic, and the image of Sri, and this is completely from our perspective as travel content creators speaking to an international market. When things are chaotic in Sri Lanka, that message goes far and wide on global news media sites, and it's in the nature of news to spread sensational news, but the corrective work is not followed through as diligently. And that's where we had the ability to come and say, hey, look, we are local creators living here. This is the situation. You can come here. And that's really powerful when no one else is really telling your story. So that's simply from the perspective of travel content creators. And it can vary depending on what kind of content you create.
Coming into the most important thing, which is the commercial value of reaching an international audience. And this is something I think everyone should really take into consideration, because this is where the biggest differentiator is, right? Yeah. And just to share just a few stats with you of our findings in the last 4 to 5 years.
And if this doesn't convince you to create content with the international audience in mind, I don't know what will.
Yeah. So our audience on YouTube over the last few years, we've done 44% of our audience is Sri Lankan, something like 4 million. And that 44%...
Share the other stats also. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 44% accounts for only 3.5% of the revenue. The CPM, which is how you get paid by YouTube, is $0.96 for Sri Lanka. Whereas our second highest, which is only 4.4% viewership, accounts for 22% of our revenue. The CPM there is $8. So Sri Lanka is 0.96 and Australia is 8. US is 9. So there is a very important thing that people need to understand about this, right? So on these international platforms, it is the advertisers' spending that dictates how much you earn. In Sri Lanka, our advertisers do not have the same kind of budgets that advertisers in a more developed country, in a developed nation would have to spend on marketing. So be it Australia, the States, wherever, when your content reaches those countries, you're going to be earning far more money than you would earn in Sri Lanka. I would say as much as 10 times more. That's just in the terms of monetization on these content platforms like YouTube. But let's look at it also from the perspective of brand sponsorships, integrations, right? So without divulging all the stats straight away, I think we spoke with Janit, and I think we will share more with the actual values in terms of sponsorships with you guys, to the 50 of you who make it into the next segment. But just to give you an indicator, in Sri Lanka, when you work with a brand or a sponsorship, they are looking at it from a rupee perspective, and they are looking at it from what they're able to uh, generate from the local audience. But when you create your content to an international audience, you are now speaking with international brands that are looking at what they generate from the entire world. So naturally, the amount you're able to charge for a sponsorship or an integration is in certain times 20 times higher than what you could charge here in Sri Lanka. And we are basically going to try and tell you as to why it is so important that you sort of understand that and gear your operations so that you're able to tap into that market. That enables you to do so much more work and so much more quality work, because now you're
competing in an international space.
Yeah, you're competing in an international space, and you have the budgets of an international creator. So in terms of the commercial value, I think that is one of the most important things, because let's face it, as a creator, one of the most important things is you need to be able to sustain yourself to continue creating.
And I'm a big believer in the fact that creators can only improve and the industry can only improve when creators are compensated well. Because if creators cannot support themselves, first of all, and then beyond, cannot invest in themselves, their gear, their skills, then you cannot create. The creator can't reach their fullest potential. So there's nothing wrong as a creator in trying to identify which is the way that you can sustain yourself and improve yourself the most. So that's just something I wanted to add into that.
And I think we touched on competitive advantage, but the last one is the exposure, the depth, and the networking opportunity. We need to understand that, you know, outside of initiatives like this, Creator Incubator, there's very little knowledge and sharing of knowledge in a small community such as ours of creators in Sri Lanka. And when you start appealing to an international audience and you start networking with international creators, you are suddenly, you know, exposed to so much more. You start seeing what people are doing in other parts of the world and start realizing how you can adapt that to create something much better here in Sri Lanka.
I think there's more on that later on.
Yes.
We'll
tap on
one thing
that.
I just want to add before we move away from this slide to commercial value of an international audience. Actually, it's beyond that. When you're creating for an international audience, like Shehan touched very lightly, that you are again competing now in an international space. You are not measuring yourself based on who is around you creating similar content. Now it is who are the biggest creators in the niche or in the market that I am in, and what is the level and benchmark of their content. And now you are aspiring to create content on that level. You are trying to reach, you are in fact trying to get a piece of their audience, which means your work needs to improve like leaps and bounds, quality, content, research, all of that. And that actually is a really great thing, because you are now forced to suddenly elevate your standards, which means
the whole industry
the whole industry as a collective improves.
So
because
as an example, I think one thing we can share from our journey, I think the first 2 years were the only years we charged in rupees, right? And at the time, I mean, we still give a dollar value, and we allow local companies to pay us in rupees to that dollar value. But the reason we stuck to dollars is because we know what our work is worth internationally, right? And by that, we are able to say, hey, look, this is what we still would earn if we work internationally. So if you want to work with us here, you would need to come on at this same rate. And while it was difficult at the start to convince people, because, you know, the local market is a lot less because it's in a local currency and people value their services a lot less.
And why should a brand pay you X amount when there's plenty of other creators who will do more for less? So it is tough. But then you have value in the fact that I think the perfect example of this is a creator called Piximperfect from India. He's someone actually that I followed, and I've been amazed by his growth. He's a creator that teaches you on how to use softwares like Photoshop, Illustrator, and breaks it down into very layman terms so that anyone can learn how to use these platforms. But the only thing is his quality, the way he shoots is amazing, and he speaks very clearly. in English in a way that is relatable not only to his Indian audience but actually to the international audience as a whole. And I think he's a perfect example. If you haven't heard of him, please check it out. Or somebody who is based in India or in a country like that is in our region, but is creating successfully content for, and not in travel also again, for a very wide international audience. So,
yep. All right, let's move on to the next one. So, the challenges of reaching and building an international audience. This is something we weren't quite aware of when we started, and honestly, it is so much more harder to do this.
Yeah.
Especially out of a country like Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
For these reasons. And
the reality of it is that it is very challenging, and you're looking at about 1 to 2 years sometimes without sugarcoating it and trying to scare with at least 1 to 2 years of creating very good content, being consistent and uploading, but having no response. Like, you can be uploading your best content for 2 years and you will not be receiving the engagement that you think is worth it.
That is primarily because of the way the algorithms work. So, for example, in our case, when we were creating content as we started around travel and travel around Sri Lanka, it was first pushing it out to the local audience because that's how the algorithm
regionally, you're based in Sri Lanka, so it pushes it out to the local audience first.
Yeah, and then what happens is that audience looks at it and they say, wait, why are you talking in English? You can talk in Sinhala. They don't necessarily like it because for them, it's not as valuable. And so we had to fight through that process for about a good 2 years where it was first being shown to this audience and they didn't really appreciate it as much.
Yeah.
It was only after we broke out of that audience and a few people outside of the country started seeing it, then we started getting confirmation that, okay, this makes sense.
And you can only
people enjoy it.
And you can only get to that point if you consistently upload good quality content, regardless of whether you're getting the engagement that you should be getting. Because the more you upload and the more consistent the quality is and the more consistent your upload schedule is, the higher your chances of and the probability of reaching one person who is from the correct audience, and that one person may be subscribing and then maybe a few more, and suddenly the algorithm starts to understand, let me try this with a different audience. And that's really what happens. One day the algorithm will test your content in front of a different audience than what it thinks that it should be in front of. And if and when it does, and if you have actually been focusing on creating that content, it will hit, and that's when you have a window of opportunity to double down on that content and expand on that.
But the challenge is that you need to understand that if you're going to go international, that is going to take time, and that is, like Shenelle said, it requires consistency.
It's a long game.
It's a long game. So, like, for example, us, as we started, a lot of people were telling us your work is really good. If you just do it in Sinhalese, you'd easily get 100,000 subscribers.
And we were tempted. We were really tempted.
You know, we were doing it, not getting any views. It was really difficult. But we stuck through and we understood, no, eventually, further down the line, we are going to tap into a much bigger market than just the Sri Lankan market. And for that reason, I think it's very important to understand that when you try to go international, the challenge is much tougher at the start.
But the reward is also worth it.
The reward is definitely worth it. So next up is the lack of resources and support systems to go international. So when we started again, there was no one for us to speak to and understand. Are we doing it right, or are we not doing it right?
We spoke to Janit.
We spoke to Janit.
That was the best support we had.
The best support we had at the time. And then even in terms of resources, you know, to be able to even analyze your CPMs, your retention,
what works, what doesn't
your
work,
style,
your intros, your retention.
Whether your content is appropriate to this international audience, you need to realize that you're not going to have that feedback system. Whereas if you're creating content for the local audience, you will immediately meet people around you who tell you, hey, I like this video of yours. Hey, I like that video of yours.
You can try this.
You can try this. So that is another challenge that you're going to face when you're trying to go international, because you're not going to have that feedback system initially. And that can be very hard because you're just throwing things into the void. What's the term you use now?
I mean, shouting
into the void?
I said that. I think one of my famous quote from when we were doing this for the last 2 years until finally one of our videos went viral in the right market. I said that you're going to be screaming into the void and getting no response for a very long time, and that can be really frustrating. But one day the void will shout back at you, and it will be great.
Yeah.
I think I'll take the next one, right?
Yeah.
So the next challenge that we faced, and of course that I think most Sri Lankan content creators will face when going international, is a lack of exposure to what is trending and of interest internationally now. I think with today, with Instagram Reels, with TikTok, and a lot of the softwares we have, you can say that we are a little bit more in tune about trends. But the truth is, most of the time, there is a big delay in any trend by the time it
Yeah,
reaches Sri
and
Lanka.
not just the trend, in the way you create your content, right? So like
No,
all
the
of
interest,
us,
yeah.
all of us are exposed to consuming content in a specific way because we're here in Sri Lanka. We
Yeah.
see certain trends and we realize, oh, this is what is nice here. Everyone likes this here.
Yeah.
But what you need to understand is that
That's
the guy,
why, yeah.
the people in the States or in Europe are not going to enjoy that same kind of content. So
Yeah.
understanding that and getting a idea of
Yeah.
you know that difference is very difficult.
I mean,
think even
even-
us,
yeah.
we're still learning that.
Of course. And like when I say trends, I'm not saying like a dance trend. What I'm saying is, let's take travel for an example, because
Yeah.
that's our market. Even in travel, to understand that, hey, travelers, yeah, they like maybe seeing 1 or 2 luxury hotels, but they want to know how can they travel sustainably. They want to know how they can help while traveling.
Yeah.
Now
Whereas-
we didn't know this until we started moving a little bit more
Yeah.
with international creators, kind of spreading our network outside. Now we have a better understanding of what that audience that travels to Sri Lanka wants right now. Actually, the information that we had was what they wanted maybe 5 years ago,
Yeah, or more so what the Sri Lankan audience wanted.
or what
They
the Sri
wanted-
Lankan audience thinks, or
They
Sri
want.
Lankan businesses think that
They want.
a
Yeah, so
traveler
like,
wants.
Coming back to the example of travel, the local market was telling us, show us more hotels, show us what the best hotels in the
Yeah,
country
you
look
should
like.
show people
Show
that we
the-
have great hotels in Sri Lanka, and like that's great. It's great to show them what the facilities we have and the experiences. But what people really want to know is, what does Sri Lanka actually look like? Because a lot of
What are
people,
the people
what are
like?
the people like? What is the food like? What is the culture like? Because if you tell someone, if you speak to 10 people in New York, I would say maybe one, if
yeah.
you're lucky, one person will know what Sri Lanka is, right? And they didn't know where Sri Lanka was or what Sri Lanka was, I think, until last year when we went all over the news during the
Yeah.
crisis. So you must, now we understand that Sri Lanka is a very new topic for these people. And so
Yeah.
we are creating with that in mind. So for them to just see some hotels, like, oh, be like, yeah, that's another country that has nice hotels, but so does the seashells,
Yeah.
right? So what is the differentiating factor?
Yeah, and so that comes back to the fact that you're not necessarily exposed to that when you're here only. And to reach out and get that exposure, you need to be following foreign creators, right?
Yeah.
Something very important if you're trying to reach an international audience is look at your own YouTube page. Are you following local creators or are you following foreign creators? You need to be inspired and following foreign creators to understand what's working, see what's
Make connections, reach out, ask questions.
Yeah, and
build
then that really
relationships.
helps. That's really what has helped us over
Yes.
the years. The last one is monetization opportunities and being able to scale your operations. So this is a huge challenge for us again because we knew we were focusing on an international audience. We knew that we couldn't do as many local brand integrations. I mean, they were coming to us, but we chose to say no because we are thinking of an international audience. There is no point of us promoting Sunlight on our channel because
No matter how much
no matter
they
how
pay
much they're
us.
willing to pay us, because we do not want our audience to be that, right? So as a result, as you start off, the amount of brands you get to work with are very few, and the chances of them paying you are also very few. But the good thing is, once you do make it, even the smallest brand will pay you 10 times what a Sunlight can pay you here.
Yeah. And in general, aligning your brand and your content and working with brands that really align with the values and ethics of your brand it adds so much value to you as a person, because at the end of the day we consider ourselves brands, but we are actually people, and it's other people that are following us. And if people sense ingenuity in any form, um, on a platform like this, when you're creating content, it actually is really detrimental to your relationship with the audience. So people will actually, I think, have what's the word I'm looking for? I think people will appreciate you more if they know that, look, we know this creator needs to have sponsors to fund themselves and to continue to create content. They already know that. But I think they appreciate you more when they know that you take the time to pick the correct brands that apply to them as well as to your brand, and there's no like inconsistencies between that. And eventually, like Shehan said in the beginning, those might be brands that really can't pay you that much. We're not saying work for free, you should charge something, but it may not be the big paying brand. But as you grow and as your audience begins to have more and more trust and faith in you, what you can charge and the value that these brands have in working with you improves tremendously.
Yeah. All right. So on to the next one. Thinking international is really thinking long term. This is something we've learned again the hard way, because when we started, we thought, oh, we're not going to need to invest too much here. But really, the first 3 to 4 years, we've invested millions, not knowing if it would work or not, but purely with the intention of knowing where we wanted to get to. So in our journey, we always, every time we made any money, we always invested it back into creating our content that was international. So for example, we would make money here in Sri Lanka, but we'd still continue to invest it into developing our content in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Dubai, in Bali, because we understood that those are the places we need to invest in order to be seen internationally. And you need to understand that as you start off, I mean, when we went to Bali the first time and we said, hey, we're creators from Sri Lanka, they asked us, where is Sri Lanka? So you need to understand that that's going to be a really tough journey.
It's a tough barrier to break.
It's a very tough barrier to break, but you need to understand the importance of that investment over a long period of time.
And this is purely from the perspective of travel creators. I mean, when you're approaching it from a different angle, it'll be different. But ideally, you want to put yourself in places where your correct target audience is going to reside in. That can be on Discord pages, or that can be like on Twitter, sharing your work on Twitter and trying to reach that audience.
Investing, I think something that's not taken seriously here is that this is also a serious business, and like any serious business, you need to invest, not just in your time, but even with the finances that you have. The more you invest, the more you will get out of it later on. And I cannot stress how important it is. We've invested everything, and it was really tough the first few years, but now we're starting to see the dividends pay out. And I think it's so important, because right now, the way we're seeing the current market is that people are not willing to invest. They only just want to exploit the reach that they have immediately and just make ends meet with that. That's not going to take you further down the line.
And that's not going to make you stand out amongst the other sea of creators that exist. And I think sometimes it can be easy to believe that creators earn really well, and because of the fact that they charge a lot. But actually, they charge a lot because they have invested a lot, and they need to reimburse themselves. But also, I have to say that it's a tough journey being a creator in any aspect. You have to kind of make peace with the fact, or be prepared to really just have a couple of difficult years to get to where you want to go. You can function on a very, I did this job, this is my payment, now I'm using that for my living expenses, that's cool, and I repeat that. But there is no growth in that system. Essentially, you're living just month by month by month, and there's no growth in the actual content that you create, or you as a brand.
Or the growth would be small. I think what we've learned is that we invested heavily into seeing international at a time when no one even thought we'd ever go international. And even though at the start it didn't seem like we were growing, now it is compounding, because we've built our presence all over, and we built this portfolio of investment all around. So it is the same thing in any niche that you're in, is that you need to think of it in that way. if you want to be seen internationally, what are the investments you need to be making to be seen internationally? And here what we're saying is think long term. Don't think about, oh, let me put $200, like the $200 you get into this video, and then I'll make $500. No, that's not what we're saying. Put $200 thinking about what you're going to get out of it 5 years down the line. Those are the important things, especially if you are 100% sure you're going down this line and you're committing to it.
Yeah.
All right, we move to the next one.
I think I just want to just say, I love this quote that you have put here, which says, do not compromise on your content strategy to stay afloat. Now, that can be a very bold suggestion, but the actual meaning of this is you now have, after listening to what we have been talking about, you now have an idea of what the kind of content you want to create to reach your target audiences. And you have a plan and you have a time span that you want to do it in. But suddenly, as you move along your timeline, you realize, now I'm finding it difficult to stay afloat. I can't make the ends meet for my business. Yeah. And here is where temptation comes in to really include these big brands that can pay you a lot but have no relevance to what you're trying to do. And this is really tough for us to say because things can get tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly, even at this point of our journey.
There are ups and downs. But I think one of the things that will pay you the most as a creator is sticking to your content strategy and really not deviating or selling yourself to the temptation of, hey, let me just do one campaign for this brand that pays really well but is not really, relevant to me. And I think that there's so much value that is added just by holding off on doing that.
Yeah. And so for us, but we understood this very early and we realized, okay, we need to find alternative ways of making money to be able to sustain, continuously investing into this. So we looked at things like video production where, again, our brand was not utilized there, but we were able to use our skills to offer a different service, earn money, reinvest that into our brand.
Yeah.
Social media management, any of you creators who are starting out, you all have the skills to do this.
Yeah.
There is plenty of money to be made there, and it doesn't require you to put your face always. So that gives you the ability to create money through other means and then help you build on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Consultancy and then obviously part-time jobs.
Yeah. So essentially you're looking at your business, the brand, as your baby, and you only do things that add value and will add to your content strategy and your growth in the long term. But when things get tough, you don't exploit the brand that you're building. Instead, you use your skills to work behind the scenes, and that is how a startup works. Any startup in the industry has a goal and a purpose, and when things get tough, you have the founders going in all sorts of directions.
I mean, not just startups, right? If you look at the biggest creator, the biggest YouTuber in the world, Mr. Beast, he himself, I think now he spends somewhere around $3 to $4 million per video. His main channel can't make that much money, but he's got other channels now that make the money for him so that he can continue his vision with his main channel.
Tell about how the brands can't pay him, so he has.
Yeah, so much so that now he's realized that he can't charge brands to pay him his worth for his mission. He's created his own brands, right? So that's how serious you need to be in terms of your vision and how you plan on achieving that, right? You don't compromise it just because this brand can pay you this much or this brand won't pay you. And so that is something that's very important when you're doing this. Even from the start, you need to understand, do not compromise on your content strategy and your vision for what you hope to achieve through this.
Instead, diversify and find other things that you can do without utilizing your brand to make the extra funds that you need to get by, or even to pump more into your main business.
Yeah. So I think we're almost 40% down of, we got maybe 30% left to go through. So if you all do have any questions, again, just a reminder, make sure you send it across via the Zoom link or on Facebook chat. I think the guys are monitoring everything and they'll send it across to us. Another important thing with regards to going international is engaging and fostering relationships with international creators. And this also touches on the topic of collaborations.
Yeah, I think we touched on this earlier as well.
this is a bit controversial maybe, but this is what we've realized and what works for us. And that is that when you are thinking of an international audience, you also need to be thinking about your collaborations in that way. For us, we've been very selective in the collaborations we've been doing because we've been thinking of the audience that that collaborator brings for us. As much as we have a lot of friends, a lot of great people who are creating content here in Sri Lanka and doing work to a Sri Lankan audience.
Does that collaboration add into our plan?
And sometimes it can be detrimental, right? So if you suddenly get, so like Travel with Wife, let's give a good example. They are like our really good friends. I think we started around the same time. We've been doing this for the longest time. We talk to each other. We help each other out a lot.
Yeah.
But we know that if we get Travel with Wife's audience into our channel, right, a massive amount of them straight away, that will affect our videos negatively because most of that audience likes consuming content in Sinhala. So they'll watch our videos and they'll say, these guys are talking in English, and they'll knock off the video at 1 minute or 2 minutes. So YouTube then thinks, oh, they just got a whole new audience,
And
but
they
that
don't like
audience
their
doesn't
content.
like their content.
Yeah.
Right? So in that way, you need to be thinking about the audience that comes to you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't, I mean, I'm sure we will work with, we
have plans,
collaborated,
yeah.
we have done stuff, but I'm saying you need to think of collaborations in that way.
In that way, yeah.
Does it add value? Does it detriment your brand? How do you sort of manage that dynamic is very important, especially if you're thinking like going international.
And the other thing I would like to add to this point that Shehan mentioned is going back to what we spoke about earlier in the fact that we tend to be behind in terms of understanding what these markets and what these audiences want, purely because we are not moving with them. We live here in Sri Lanka surrounded by our communities and we love that. But when you're creating for that audience, it's important to move with people who think in the terms of and the way that they do. You know, something that we might think is really expensive is not really expensive for them. And like it's important to understand those differences between yourself and the audience that you're creating for. So it's, I think I would equate it to if you're running a business and you have business partners abroad that help you and facilitate you. This would essentially be something like that. You're a creator here, but it is of great value for you to have a network of people. They don't have to even be creators. It is very important to have friends who are creators abroad who you can bounce ideas off, where you can suss situations in different countries and see how that affects you. So those are really important as a local creator creating for the international audience. But it's also a very good way to kind of understand what these communities are thinking.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Focus. So next up is the actual body of content that you create and focusing on stories that are of interest to an international audience. I think a common mistake even we found ourselves doing, or many of the creators as you start out you find doing, is you see these stories from a point of, oh, this would be interesting for everyone who's around me. But you don't see it from the perspective of, oh, this story is interesting for the international audience, right? So, for example, there are opportunities that come along this. Now, we can only speak on our niche, which is travel. We understood somewhere in maybe year 2 or year 3 that people aren't searching for what we are doing as individuals. People don't want to see Shenelle's day in the life at the start.
As much as I would have liked, I would have loved to made a day in a live video, but I think nobody cares in the beginning.
Cares. Like we did a few of those and no one really cared. But then we realized, hey, people are searching Sri Lanka. People are searching Anuradhapura.
They care about these things.
These are the things that they want to know about, and these are the things that they're searching. So then we realized, okay,
let us give them what they want to see.
And so it's very important that even when you're structuring your content, the message you want to put out, you don't have to compromise on. But the way in which you package it, you need to think about how does this appeal to that international audience? Is this something the international audience is searching for, right? That is super important. Don't just look at what is trending here at the moment.
Think about it in terms of creating content there's already traffic on the internet. There's already people searching things on YouTube. They're searching things on Google. And essentially what you want to do is you want to find out how you can make a video based answer that helps them, that is helpful and valuable to them, and placing it on a certain place, specific place on the internet with good SEO so that they can find it. That's essentially what I think the most important thing about creating content for an international audience is simply that, finding out what are their interests, where are the gaps where I can now go and say, hey, nobody is making videos in English for foreigners who want to come and travel Sri Lanka. I mean, you have foreigners, but what about a local perspective? There's nobody there. Let me try and do this so that we can give a new perspective. Because it's one thing to identify and say, okay, I'm making content for the international audience, but the niche or the place that you're trying to put your content in is completely saturated. There's already tons of people doing it. You're kind of setting yourself up for, I think, failure, because of the fact that you're now competing in a space where there's already a lot of international creators addressing these queries. Unless you can find a way to really stand out by differentiating your content, which is a possibility depending on the market that you are trying to reach, that's great. But if not, I think a better way to reach success while reaching international audiences is to find places where people's questions are not being met or there's a gap in the market and placing yourself there.
Yeah. So I think next what we'd like to go to is in terms of
what is working hard.
Yeah.
Everybody works hard. And
Yeah.
no matter what you do, whether you're in corporate, whether you're a freelance, whether you're a creator, everyone works hard.
Yeah. But that is not enough in this
industry.
You need to be working really smart as well. By that, what we mean is you could be doing all the right things and putting it on one platform or talking to just one audience, and sometimes that might not give you the response you're looking for. But by working smart, repurposing that content, resharing it across other areas, maybe adding subtitles in other languages, right? There are so many different ways to do this. And again, from our example, a video we did some time back, which was on the current situation in Sri Lanka.
Mm-hmm.
We first put it up on Instagram, and it had like 120,000 views, right? And we thought, oh, okay, that's cool. We put it up on YouTube, which is our main platform, that had only 70,000 views. And we're like, okay, that's not bad. We then put it on TikTok, that had small amount of
3,700
odd views.
Yeah.
And then we put it on
Facebook, which wasn't like actually one of our main platforms. It was just something we were starting to tinker around with.
Yeah, and that blew up. That got us the most amount of views there. And since then to today, Facebook, we've seen the most amount of growth, right? Now, this was something we had never thought of. We were focused primarily on YouTube. We thought YouTube was where this audience was. YouTube and Instagram were like our main areas. But by repurposing this content, just trying out different things, and not necessarily, I mean, the hard work was already done, but now it required us to think outside the box and realize how can we get this out to more people. And that is very important, really. Don't limit yourself to just one platform.
Maximize your content. You know, you're making for one platform, but maybe cut it up, see what works, find the pieces that will work on other short form content, and just really maximize your reach.
Yeah, and you'd be really surprised to see what works where. We are continuously experimenting on this front, and we are continuously surprised with the amazing sort of response that we get across these platforms.
All right, next.
All right.
Shall I begin?
Yeah, go for it. The last slide.
Being responsible, credible, and good ambassadors. So the moment you take up this mantle of now I'm going to create content internationally, the most important thing that you have to understand is you are now an ambassador for your country. So everything you create and everything you put out there, whether you create content based about Sri Lanka or not, people still see you as a Sri Lankan. So you are essentially part of the branding for this country for people who have no idea what Sri Lanka is. So there's a level of I would say responsibility that comes with this that has to be taken very seriously.
Yep. In terms of using your platform also, you need to understand that especially today with all the trends and the different ways that you can monetize on these platforms. I think a good example that we're seeing here is a lot of foreign creators come to Sri Lanka and go around giving a few $100s to people
To
and
make
say,
viral
to make
content.
viral content, right? I'm sure we could do that too and make viral content.
Yeah.
But that's not the right thing to do for our country, because that makes our country look like a beggar, right? And you need to always have a conscience and be responsible of that.
Yeah.
Is the content you're making going to affect our country positively or negatively, right? It is very important if you're going international, because you're no longer just talking to a little audience here, you're talking to everyone. And it is very, very important that you create that content in a way that is responsible and that is positively affecting
the
community.
Image of the country. Yes.
Now you might say, yeah, but by giving some money to a person, you're doing good, you're creating a positive impact. But really, if you look deeper into it, that is not the case, right?
Yeah,
you're encouraging more people to come and give money.
And then what that really does is that if you take it from the point of view of like a foreigner coming and doing this to create content, what that actually teaches our like people of our countries, that hey, when you see like a foreigner, there's
a guy with the camera.
That guy with the camera, he has an opportunity for you to make some money. So you're essentially trying to so like you're programming society or people to respond to this, and that's really not productive, because we want to teach people how to fish. We don't want to just feed them a fish one day just so and take a picture of it, and then I benefit off it, and then I go about my way, and this man is starving again the next day. It's an example, but just go
obviously across all different content categories this changes, but the essence of it is think about
how your content is going to affect the people of this country positively.
And even in terms of the trend you're creating, is this trend that you're going to create by doing this thing that goes viral benefiting? Is it positive? How would it impact if another 100 people did the same thing you're doing? You need to be thinking about this, because I think a lot of people don't understand how the significance of the influence creators have today online, right? And this is something that is very important and should not be taken lightly. I think all of us,
don't underestimate the power of your influence, whether you have 1,000 followers or whether you have like 10,000, 100,000, a million. There is massive responsibility and power that in your influence that you have to take responsibility for, and everything you create can be influencing other creators to follow suit. So really take pride in the work that you do and really think about the positive impact. Like Shehan said, I think the best way to think about it is what I'm doing. If 100 other people do it, is this going to benefit society or not? If it's not, I think you should rethink the process.
So the next one is being wary of external influences and hidden agendas that come out through your communications. This goes with our with the next point also, which is choosing your brand partnerships wisely. Sometimes a brand or whoever that is sponsoring your content might have a different agenda to what it is you want to do, and you need to think really carefully about what is the actual message. Again, this comes down to responsibility, but this is understanding that even though sometimes your intentions can be 100% good, there can be other people that can take those intentions and turn it around.
You are a channel at this point, like not just a physical channel, but you are a communication channel, and that is something that can be misused by brands for their agendas. So I think that's something to really think about when you're creating content. I know it can be tough, again, like I said, when brands are willing to pay you a lot of money, and like that's really important. But I think that, again, it comes back to understanding how much power, whether you have a small following or large following, there's a lot of power that you have to influence a nation, possibly, and about a nation. So it's being responsible for that.
And then lastly is obviously staying in line with your mission and your vision. I think this is something a lot of creators, it could be good and bad, but a lot of creators, what happens is they start off saying, hey, I want to be a food blogger, right? But then further down the line, as they are becoming food bloggers, they realize, oh, I can make more money being a social media consultant. And then they forget about the food blogging, right? That is something you need to keep in mind of, right? Like you have to stay in line with what you want to do, and you need to think about it over a 5-year period. Like, how do you get there? Doing this work consistently will only get you there. You cannot keep pivoting based on what's happening around you.
Yeah, whatever offers come your way.
No matter what niche you're in, it is so important that no matter what challenges come, no matter whatever it is, you have to stick to that mission. That will ensure you go forward, and enjoying that obviously is very important. Yeah. And I think, that was our last slide. I think we will move on to the Q&As. We might take a small break just to get the questions in. If you guys have any more questions, please do send it our way. And also, if you want to reach out to us directly at any point later on, you can reach out to us at Shenelle R and Shehan23, or reach out to the team here at Create Incubator, and they will definitely get in touch with us also.
Cheers. I hope you guys found that useful.
We'll be back with the questions in a second.
Right.
Awesome. So we've got a bunch of questions, and we only have 10 minutes to answer it. So I'm going to try condense it and merge them together, and I will pitch it to Shenelle, and she will answer it, and I'll pitch in as well. So the first one is how to start as a travel influencer. What are the contents that will work out these days? And I'll add in the question also, when it comes to travel content, do you feel the niche is overused, or does it still have space for growth?
I think this goes back to the point we covered in really identifying the market that you're creating for, and then deciding whether you want to, if it's saturated, do you still want to place your content there and differentiate yourself? Or do you want to find a niche within that market that is not being met and address that? Now, Shehan, you can expand.
Yeah, and to add into that, as a travel content creator out of Sri Lanka, there is a lot of space, especially if you're addressing an international market, because think about it. How many people are sharing the stories of Sri Lanka with the world that are Sri Lankan?
Not many.
Not many, right? There are foreigners that come, but foreigners only have a perspective, a very small perspective to this country. Whether you're in Jaffna, whether you're in Mullatiu, whether you're in Batiklo, you are able to share a story on the internet that no one else
here
is
are
able to share.
A few ideas. Like one example is Minority Taste, Ruzaina. I love her work because she really she's a food blogger that showcases the cultural aspect and how food in Sri Lanka got to Sri Lanka, whether it's the Dutch influence, the Persian influence, the merchants' influence from back in the day. So all that is really important, and she's able to dive deep by focusing on that. And that's really valuable for food creators who are coming to Sri Lanka, for people who are traveling to Sri Lanka for food, to really just watch her channel and get that idea. Even if you're somebody who's based, let's say, in Batiklo, like Shehan said, we can go to Batiklo once or twice and make a video, but if you live in that area, you know what are the best things that you can do there. You know that area like the back of your hand.
Go with what you know.
Go with what
you know, but adapt it so that it is of use to an international audience. That's what we'd have to say there. On to the next question. How to approach international audiences as a singer? What kind of content do I need to do? And then if you're creating videos on a food startup factor, what should we consider? So we'll take food and then as a singer. So as a musician, I think honestly, we don't know too much, but obviously the first thing would be to do it, to do covers of international.
And also really think about what is maybe you don't want to go for the trending songs that do covers of trending songs, because there's obviously a lot of creators in those markets already doing them. Try to find up and coming creators, indie creators, things that small groups of that community think are really cool, and place yourself there.
And then bring in the twist of what makes you unique, right? So
a Sri Lankan aspect.
Sri Lankan twist to it. So we've been telling a lot of people, be like, if you're a musician, make your music in front of scenic sites around Sri Lanka. Right? Out of the 8.4 billion creators, only 8 million creators could do that out of here.
Produce it with a Sri Lankan drum aspect in the background. We don't know about music, but these are some examples, I would say.
And the thing is, you need to realize these things take time. You're not going to get confirmation straight away. Even us, we didn't get confirmation for about 2 or 3 years. So you need to understand, keep iterating and going about that.
But I think the most important thing to appeal in an international audience is to have something that makes you unique for those people. So
Yeah.
we have a lot. I think we tend to look into international markets and what's trending there and want to be like that. But I say the real way to be successful is to look back, look at the country, look at the culture, look at the history, and see what you can draw from that and make your content stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to the next one. How can I optimize my content for search engines and improve its discoverability? Honestly, since like AI has developed and ChatGPT and all these things have come, this has got so much easier. You can just use these generative AI models and figure out, and obviously you need to know a bit yourself, but today you can just figure out the best ways to search engine optimize across all platforms by just using these platforms.
Well, that's a great question because that is
Very
really important.
But maybe it might not be as important now because everyone will be doing it and flooding the market with SEO. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Next question. How can I be an influencer if you are an introvert?
So this is something that we just discussed before coming on here. You'd be surprised that most creators are in fact introverts, because I mean the two of us were doing really great here right now. We're both introverts because of the fact that there's nobody around us. I mean, just the camera guys and a few people in the control room. But honestly, what I'm saying is, as a person who is introverted or a bit shy, being a creator is a great way to express yourself. You don't have the pressure of so many people watching you
or listening
to you immediately. You get to kind of edit your work so that you're happy with it. I mean, at some point you need to draw the line and just be like one take and let's go, because otherwise you can get caught up editing yourself too much, and that's not a good thing. But yeah, you'd be surprised to know that most creators are introverts. We are in fact introverts. We love to stay at home and just edit.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. Can a creator who isn't working with travel content work with the same guidelines for reaching an international audience?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Can a creator who isn't working with travel content work with the same guidelines for reaching an international audience? When it's faceless content, creating animated characters to address issues with a storyline, what would your advice be on pushing the content out to an international audience and receiving sponsorships? Obviously, this is going to be harder, and our personal views is that you are going to need to put your face in front of any content going forward, because everything else can very easily be created today and replicated. So even if you did something and it was successful, there'll be another 10 other people who will see that and then replicate you very soon. So in that sense, you need to look at it from a sponsor's point of view. A sponsor doesn't see as much value in let's take like Patta History, right? It was awesome. Patta History is like such a cool animated program sharing a very interesting historical component of Sri Lanka. But if you think about it, today with like AI runway and like
any kind of animations,
any sort of all the animations have gotten so much easier. The cost of entry is much lower. So you're going to have a flood of all these people coming in. So I think it might be tough getting sponsorships. I honestly wouldn't know how to sort of tell you how to go about that, because I don't see that going forward too well, because there'll be a lot of creators. You might need to find other ways of monetizing it. Perhaps you create brands around your content so that you make the money off the sale. Like, so you'd have to, like Mr. Beast, you'd have to create the brand that you sponsor the video with. Then it would work. But trying to convince another brand to come on board an animated series or something like that is going to be hard unless you're very big. Last question. Hi Shehan, you mentioned that you guys heavily invested before going international. Just to get an idea, can we know what are the things that you invest on? Is it campaigns or equipment? I believe it's important to understand. Both, I think are...
And it's not that we invested only before. We invested before with a few things that we needed, and then invested throughout.
We're continuously investing. So I think everything has been invested over a period of time. Our equipment fund is like, I mean, our equipment gear is like over 10 million now. It's like more than a car, and we still don't have a car. So it kind of gives you an idea of like how much we've had to invest and our priorities. And then with the campaigns, again, you know, we've invested stupid amounts of money into these campaigns without ever being able to recover it. Every trip we've done abroad, it's been a complete investment that we'll never recover. But we know that that adds value. You know, being able to work with the Tourist Board of Thailand is a major value for us, right? Being able to work with Accor hotels in Dubai, tremendous value. But we had to spend our money to get there. We had to spend our money to do all the experience, skydiving, all these things. So eventually you'll be able to justify it as a business and say these are business costs. But starting off, really, you have to go. It's a case of how much you're willing to go.
We're not saying spend everything, but yes, kind of. But we are saying, like, you know, whenever you have extra money, like you have to kind of think, okay, how much of this do I need to live, and how much of this can I afford to reinvest into my business?
Yeah, I'd also like to add one final point here that is a very interesting take that we didn't consider. When we invested into all our gear, I think we finished buying majority of our stuff 2 years ago. I think our total was 5.5 million, right? That investment into gear proved out to be a much better investment than had we had that in cash in a fixed deposit today, right? 5.5 million is worth 10 million for us today. So if you think about the way the world is going, if you think about like inflation, everything that's happening, the safest thing for you to invest in is yourself.
Your business,
your business and yourself. So do not hesitate in investing in yourself. Whatever it happens, whether you fail, you still learn something that no one can take away from you.
And there's also that aspect of like the sacrifices that you will have to make these investments. You know, that does mean hanging out with your friends less. That does mean going out and spending less money. I think for the first 2 years, like, we barely saw our friends. Maybe like even now we barely see our friends. But like it's about prioritizing your life, because you can't do something like this without sacrificing certain luxuries and comforts, and you know, those are things like spending time with your friends, going out on a trip, going out to bars every weekend. Like, those things add up. And for us, we would always be like, but if we do like 1 month of like not going out and saving this money, that could be a camera, that could be a lens, that would add this much value to our business. So I think you have to think in those terms, and you have to make sacrifices if you want to succeed in something like this.
And don't be afraid to do it, because as long as you're investing in yourself and you have control of it, you can't go wrong.
All right.
I think that's a good way to end it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks a lot.
Cheers.
I hope you all enjoyed it. And I think we're also looking forward to the next session, which is on how to use AI. Oh, no. Next session is with Janit. And then after that, there's another one on how to use AI.
That's the one you're looking forward to.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Bye.